Integration between automation apps and APIs is quickly becoming a key aspect of an automation administrator's skill set. Not only do automation administrators regularly create scripts to automate the repetition of daily tasks, it is becoming more common for automation administrators to integrate API requests into other automation frameworks. Hi, I'm Chris from the Nutanix Technical Marketing Engineering team, and today we're going to look at the integration of Nutanix NCM Self-Service Runbooks with the Nutanix v4 APIs and authenticating v4 API requests using API keys. The goal of this video is to use a demo environment running Nutanix Prism Central and AOS 7.3 to demonstrate v4 API key authentication and how it can reduce the number of manual tasks an administrator would need to follow. Generally speaking, a user session is authenticated with username and password. However, in various scenarios, it may be mandatory for a user session or API request to be authenticated with API key. In the context of this demo, an API key can be considered synonymous with an API token, and here we require various outcomes. The primary outcomes are a new user account specifically for our automation scenarios from which API requests will be sent. These API requests will not be authenticated by HTTP basic username and password mechanisms, but will be authenticated with an API key. As part of this demo, we will also create the new API key for our new user. Lastly, our new user will be added to a new authorization policy. A Nutanix IAM authorization policy outlines user permissions regarding what the account has permission to do. One important note here is that API key authentication is not supported by standard user accounts, only by a special type known as a user account of type service account. When sending API requests through NCM Self-Service, many activities are handled through self-service endpoints. Here we show the creation of a new endpoint that will be used as the basis for Nutanix IAM API requests. In this demo, Nutanix IAM handles the creation of user accounts, authorization policies, and, critically, our API keys. Starting with the name and project, we can then specify that this endpoint will be for HTTP requests, and then specify the base URL. The base URL is prepended to all API requests sent to this endpoint and authenticated with the method selected in the authentication section. Here we show the endpoint connections will be authenticated with the username admin and the specified password. For the next endpoint, the configuration is similar but differs in that the base URL changes slightly and the authentication method is set to none. In this example, no authentication is selected, as these requests will be authenticated using new API keys. With the endpoints configured, we can continue with creating the basis for our main runbook. From NCM Self-Service, select Runbooks and provide a runbook name, the associated project, and an optional default endpoint. HTTP tasks configuration within an NCM Self-Service Runbook consists of many familiar steps. Here, we add a new task, set the type to HTTP, and select the associated endpoint. At this stage, we can enter the full relative path for this specific HTTP request. In this case, a Nutanix IAM request to list all roles matching the name superadmin. Because this is an HTTP GET request, no JSON payload is required. We can then select the request content type, which in this case is application/JSON. A critical part of this task's configuration is telling NCM Self-Service what to do with the response from the request. Here we show the variable superadmin_ext_id will be set to the entity ID of the first matching IAM role, and that HTTP response code 200 will indicate a successful request, with HTTP response code 400 indicating a failure. Additionally, HTTP response code 409 indicates a matching role was not found. Shown here is an HTTP POST request configured almost identically to the GET request. The only difference is that this request contains a JSON payload, but it still returns a variable that will be set by NCM Self-Service. NCM Self-Service Runbooks accept user input in the form of input variables. Here, we are defining a single input variable named PCIP, which the runbook can use to accept a Prism Central IP address from the user. This input variable has been configured as type string and has been set to the IP address of our demo environment's Prism Central instance. Other variable types are supported, including date and time, integer, and multi-line string for extended text input. When configuring our endpoints earlier in this video, the PCIP variable was used as part of the endpoint's base URL. Similar to input variables, NCM Self-Service can also make use of output variables. When initially configured, these output variables are used as placeholders for use in task steps. Here, we are configuring 3 output variables, each of which will be used to store specific API request response data for use in future runbook steps. With all steps completed, we can now save our runbook and prepare for the first test run. So far, we have configured our endpoints, created a new runbook, user account, API key, and authorization policy. We have also added a final runbook task to verify our API key authentication is working as expected. During the execution phase of our demo, we can use the previously defined input variable, PCIP, to enter the IP address of our Prism Central instance. We can also verify the base URLs and make sure they are formatted correctly. As the runbook execution progresses, each task is highlighted and, during or after the runbook has completed, each task can be examined for errors or output as necessary. In our demo, we can see all tasks have completed successfully, including the API request that was authenticated with our new API key. To try Nutanix NCM Self-Service for yourself, head on over to nutanix.com/testdrive, or to start your Nutanix v4 API journey today, head over to nutanix.dev and check out the v4 API introduction. See you in the next video.